It is time for the second week in a row of the new segment with Shayne Stanfield, Sipping on Scripture.
Hey,
good morning, Shayne.
Good morning, Shayne. How you doing?
Good morning, guys. And so I'm learning inimitable. So I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but you learn something every day.
Yeah, inimitable. That's what you are. You're often imitated, never duplicated.
Yeah. I thought that was pinkish.
Yeah.
I thought that's what that meant.
Well, they call me lots of things.
Yeah.
But
I'll pick a different word next week.
there you go. So today we're sipping on Scripture with readings for the Monday of the 19th week in Ordinary Time, also the memorial of St. Clare, Virgin. Love with all your heart and soul. This is the title of today's reflection, which is taken from the 10th chapter of Deuteronomy, where Moses said to the people, "And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you but to fear the Lord your God, and follow his ways exactly, to love and serve the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, to keep the commandments and statutes of the Lord, which I enjoin on you today for your own good." This seems to be a reiteration of what Moses told the Israelites as the greatest commandment in the 6th chapter. But he adds later, for the Lord your God is the God of hosts, the Lord of hosts, the great God, mighty and awesome, who has no favorites, accepts no bribes, who executes justice for the orphan and the widow, and befriends the alien, feeding and clothing him. So you too must befriend the alien, for you were once aliens yourselves in the land of Egypt. The command here to befriend the alien, as God befriends the alien by feeding and clothing him, is not unlike the second greatest commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. We read that Jesus reiterates both of these in the Gospels in the 22nd chapter of Matthew, the 12th chapter of Mark, and the 10th chapter of Luke. There's a slight variation with each of these, where Jesus added love with all of your mind and love with all of your strength, but I think this was to simply emphasize the necessity to love with your whole being. Is it possible to love one aspect of your being and not the other? Absolutely, which is probably why Jesus may have added these. Take, for instance, the earlier version of this commandment, which was love with both the heart and soul. An example of love with all the heart could be the fulfillment or satisfaction of emotional desires such as happiness. However, a love of all the soul can only be a love related to one thing, since our souls were created solely for union with God. For instance, we can love with all our heart the game of football, even to the extent of living much of our lives around that sport. But there is seemingly very little, if anything, about football to love with a soul. Our souls end up crying out because of this, and it usually comes in the form of a growing sense of emptiness or dissatisfaction. But we are all pretty good about drowning this out by increasing our disordered loves of the heart to our own demise. The Israelites that I cited in my reflection last week were a great example of this, as they seemed to love with all their hearts the great foods that they were fed while in Egypt, even to the extent that they forgot or ceased to care that they were slaves. So how do we avoid disordered love such as this? How do we love with all of our heart and soul? We must begin with the foundation of love, which is to know. How can we love someone if we don't know that person first? So we need to know God first, and that comes from Scripture. According to the 4th chapter, the first letter of John, we are to love God because God loved us first. And we also know from the same chapter that God is love. Because God is love, it's what he does most perfectly, so we are loved into creation, which is how we were loved first. But we can't possibly respond to that love by loving in return without first knowing all of this. So we begin to love by responding to God's love in little ways, because we know little of God at first, and we find that there is always more to know. Coming to know God also takes place by personally experiencing his love, and that happens only with eyes and heart that are open to those experiences. I spoke during this segment over the last couple of weeks about being blind to God's love, which came in the form of spectacular miracles, and that blindness was because of hardness of heart. Remember that the scribes and Pharisees were asking Jesus for a sign to prove himself after they either witnessed or at least heard testimony of the countless signs and wonders that should have done exactly that. How about the Israelites wandering in the desert claiming to be famished while longing for tasty food after they had been nourished each and every day by the miracle of the manna? Evidence of God's love for us is everywhere in our lives every day. We just need to make sure that our eyes and heart are open to it, because once it is experienced, our knowledge of God grows, and so does our love of God. We also have the gifts of faith and hope to help with those things that we don't yet know or experience about God and his love. And it's this belief that helps propel us even further into our journey towards total love. The first chapter, the first letter of Peter, does a nice job to describe this overall process. Although you have not seen him, you love him. Even though you do not see him now, yet believe in him, you rejoice with an indescribable and glorious joy as you attain the goal of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Yes, growing a love with all your heart and soul truly becomes quite a joy-filled experience. As St. Julian of Norwich wrote, one of my favorite quotes, truth sees God, and wisdom contemplates God, and from these two comes a third, a holy, wonderful delight in God, who is love.
And look, this love is not easily accomplished, right? And so we have a way of reacting to things that become difficult in life, offenses that come forward, difficult people that come forward. We need to recognize that is our path to love.
Yeah.
I mean, if we don't have difficulty, if we don't have things that challenge us, our love isn't capable of growing.
And it's, I think these little things, these little nuances, we'll say, in life, these challenges, it's our way to introduce us to the school of love, and that's the cross. St. Maximilian Kolbe reminds us of that. The school of love is the cross. You know, Christ keeps telling us over and over again to pick up our cross and follow us. It comes from not being nailed to the cross ourselves. As you know, some people are martyred in most horrific ways. But the point being is we're giving these little challenges each and every day to open our hearts to love when we're inconvenienced. You know, when somebody pulls out from us in front of us, during traffic or something. You know, it's not something that we're supposed to react to in a horrible way, but maybe take an opportunity to pray for them, because we're gonna start enjoying that love in those challenges.
Well, we have those opportunities every time you turn around too, and it reminds us how frail we are.
Oh,
because we react so quickly.
Yeah, no, that's it. And you know, Dave, you bring up a great point. It's that opportunity to love always, and that's really where we strive. Christ is begging us each and every day to imitate him. And again, I can't stress that enough, that it is to embrace that cross in those trials, those minor trials, because the more that we embrace the minor trials, the more that we're going to embrace the bigger trials. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen with problems in family. That's going to happen with, maybe a loss of a job. You name it. A cancer diagnosis. We're being prepped each and every day, to grow in love during challenges. So when the big ones come along, we can give ourselves totally.
I think it's a great point, because if you're not in the habit of love, if you're not in the habit of responding with generosity, if you're not in the habit of forgiving, if you're not in the habit of, as St. Paul says, giving thanks in all circumstances, you're not going to be at that place in that moment of challenge where you can meet it correctly.
And that's exactly.
It starts in the small things.
Yeah, it starts in the small things, and and people have heard time and time again. It's we're supposed to give it up. It's like, well, what does that mean? Well, it's that you're going to give up that frustration.
Yeah.
Instead of keeping it from yourself and letting it just boil in you to the extent that you're gonna lash out. No, you give it up to him, because he's taken it all before. He wants to take it, and he wants to fill you with his love.
Yeah, I love that school of love. I love that.
Yes, School of Love is a cross, St. Maximilian Kolbe.